Welcome to the Jets UK podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Andres Groves. I'm joined by one of my co-hosts, Matthew Merrett. Matt, how are you doing today?
Andres, my guy. I had a lovely weekend, all flowing nicely, and then we get to 6 p.m. on Sunday. The excitement's there, new season. We're ready to go. We've got Red Zone on the laptop, the Jets on the TV. We're pumped. We come out, and within 10, 15, 30 minutes, depending on how generous you want to be, it was all sucked out of me. The 9 months getting ready for the season, and I swear, Dan, it was embarrassing. The guys have all this time to get hyped up, and they drop an absolute lead balloon on us like that. I mean, I feel like this podcast, we can almost skip the podcast and repeat like all of the ones we did post-game last season because it was more of the same rubbish.
It wasn't great, that's for sure. I did say that this is like the same game that we've seen the Jets play for over a decade, where the defense does okay, holds up for a decent amount of time, but just the offense can't get anything moving. And the defense eventually just, gives in to a superior opponent, a better quarterback with, better weapons. Whatever the combination is, it's it's the same basic story outline that we've seen before. I've had I'm a little bit more. I see a little bit more of the positives there. Overall, there's a lot of negatives, no doubt. We lost. We didn't look great for the majority of the game. The offense obviously got the touchdown, but it's just putting lipstick on a pig because it was obviously a late score that made the score look more respectable. That being said, I think there was elements of the game that should be focused on positively. But there is still a lot of criticism to be around. So we're going to dive into all of that. Obviously, we're also going to try to look forward to how we can try to constructively look forward and move forward to the game in Cleveland next week. Our first road game against a team that was able to pick up a win this past Sunday. So Matt. Where do we start really? Is it where do you want to dive into? What segment? Where do you want to start? The offense, the defense? Where do you want to start?
I think we have to start at the top, and then this loss, man. I think the first thing you say, offensive line. Joe Douglas comes as this offensive line mastermind. That was embarrassing. That is the most expensive offensive line in the NFL. No team is paying offensive linemen more this season than the New York Jets. And to drop an absolute disaster class like that, and injuries, whatever. 4 of the 5 starters who are meant to be starting when we open training camp started. And yes, I get fans switched left to right. It was embarrassing, the offensive line. Joe Douglas has mucked around with this offensive line group over the offseason. Everyone knew they needed tackle depth. He didn't get it sorted. Dwayne Brown, he's injured, but you make your own luck. He's a 37-year-old guy. His seat is getting warm, Joe Douglas. If the offensive line can't get it together, and that's what his calling card was when he joined the Jets, that is a worry. Secondly, Salah. He's becoming so performative. He needs to start backing this out with words. We talk about all gas, no break. He's like in his press conferences, we're going to match their intensity. We're going to come out flying. We're going to fire to the ball. They didn't do that. There was no intensity. They kind of played it through at practice squad places. There's a couple of places where the new defenders showed up and kind of played with that intensity. So Whitehead get to the ball, Quan Alexander get to the ball. But even then, that kind of fizzled away. The Jets defense, and it shows how down bad we are. The Jets defense was probably the highlight of the game, and we could defend them. But they still let Devin Duvernay score 2 touchdowns. Devin Duvernay has been in the league for 3 years. He doubled his career touchdown total yesterday. He had 2 over his first 3 seasons. Got 2 more yesterday. It's embarrassing. They had their backup center playing left tackle. And people like Carl Lawson couldn't get any pressure. It was anonymous. So the defense was embarrassing. And it's just Robert Saleh comes out to the end of the game saying, moral victories, we're proud, we fought our asses off. So frustrating having to listen to this over and over again when it's not replicated on the field. And the Jets, between the 20s, weren't whatever points, 15 points worse off than the Ravens, but they just lacked this execution and intensity
Yeah.
on the pitch. And then finally at the top, like Matt LaFleur regressed to September Matt LaFleur again. He did it again last season. Some of the personnel groupings were mad. You paid CJ and Conklin a lot of money, and we're trying to make Lawrence Cager happen at the start of the game. It's nonsense. And then the play calls. He tried to get a quick passing game going, but as soon as it became apparent that the line was getting collapsed in on, there wasn't any adaptation. We didn't see the end arounds which he used last year to kind of keep the edges from shooting downwards. We didn't see the kind of move in the pocket, moving Flacco around and trying to give him that extra 1.5 seconds of space to find receivers. So it was as shoddy as they come on a first day, and it's
Yeah.
Joe Douglas, Robert Saleh, Lafleur. They have to pull this together, otherwise their seats are going to get warmer and warmer and warmer over the next 17 weeks.
I mean, the way I look at it is I just don't see there's negativity as you do. We've been firing these messages off during the game, after the game. I've allowed you the platform to kind of vent out. And then look, there was a lot bad. I'm not saying hey, everything is great. It wasn't, as I said. The score should have been larger than it was. But I saw, and I do agree that there is things that you need to see better performances from the people that are not even on the field. Like Joe Douglas, for me, and this is something we've been going on about for talking about this over the last few weeks, is the whole tackle position. Yes, you need to get someone better as another backup, but the tackles. If you say Fant had a bad game, if you still have confidence in Fant, and you've got Mitchell there, who I think he looked pretty good for what it is. He wasn't the problem. I think we had down games from Conor McGovern, down game from Laken Tomlinson. They should bounce back. I expect better. I knew this line wasn't going to be gelled. They've hardly had any snaps together. So I'm not surprised that this was this is part of the reason why I was pretty negative, and I tried to have a bit more positivity to my score, but actually I felt it was going to be a bigger loss, closer to actually what it ended up being, purely because I thought that the line mixed with Joe Flacco's lack of ability to do anything other than just stand there and take the hits, it wasn't a good combination potentially, and I thought maybe the only chance would be if he can get the ball out quickly, which alludes to Mike LaFleur having not the best game. Of course, like he struggled to really get things moving and helping Flacco with the play calling to kind of get the ball in the playmakers' hands, like you said. But the offensive line, I don't see, like, they put the resources in. They went for Mackay. It's blown back in their face. Right, fair enough. But you end up you focus on getting Sauce Gardner. I don't think anyone's complaining about Sauce, especially after what we saw from yesterday. Him and Reed were fantastic additions, and they had good games. They really had good games. We have other issues on the defense, which I'll get to in a second. But we're not going to say, we would have taken a Kwanu over Sauce after what we're seeing from both of them, even though Kwanu would have been, a position of need compared to what we needed because of hindsight. But you take the chance on Becton, you take the superior quality player in Sauce, and you move forward. He gets injured. You bring in Dwayne Brown. He gets injured. You bring in Max Mitchell for a 4th round pick. That's the same round as we got Michael Carter. That's not it's not a 7th round flyer or undrafted free agent. Undrafted rookie free agent. There's significant capital in him. They expect him to be good, and he looked okay. So I would like to see maybe a cheap veteran who's better than what they have. But at this stage, they're probably like, well, we'd rather keep McDermott because he knows he's part of the team. I'm not a fan of that because I don't like McDermott. I think anybody off the street would be better within 2 seconds of walking in the building. But that is what it is. The thing is, I think that we had multiple mistakes. Conklin fumble, Brees fumbles. That was on drives that we could have got 3 or 7 points. Those were costly mistakes as we were driving. We obviously had the interception from Flacco as well. These are mistakes that you don't expect them to be something that occurs. This is just sloppy football, and you expect them to be better. But it's not something that you can really blame on Joe Douglas at this point. Now, Saleh, you say about Saleh, he's been quite performative. I do agree that I don't think he's never going to be a person who wants to chew players out and kind of get in their face and all that. But at the same time, I do feel he has to install them with a little bit more like kind of having a bit more bravado, a bit more confidence because they go out there and it just was flat. It was really really flat on offense, on the offense. So 100%, I agree. It wasn't great, but I do see positivities. The defense, while I was disappointed a little bit with Carl Lawson, it's his first game back from an Achilles injury. We've seen the Achilles injury just be a disaster for athletes trying to get back to it. Let's see how he progresses from there. But I thought that we stopped the run against a really strong running team. We kept Lamar in check. We made him throw the ball, and unfortunately, obviously, there was miscommunication. It was obviously a great play from Duvernay on the first touchdown. The second big play, which was obviously the one to Bateman, miscommunication with Joyner and Sauce, and that's where it gets to the point where I'm back to Joe Douglas. Is the safety position was the first position that we listed as the weakest group, and we knew it was not going to be good. Joyner had the potential to be an actual problem, and he was. He gave a huge play on a penalty, and then he obviously was pivotal, and that was the hammer blow. That was the boom. You're out of the game once that touchdown to Bateman happened. You can't. I would have. Will Parks, not a great player, but I just think he would have been better. I don't know what hell they were thinking with Joyner. Like, I know he hasn't played, but you've got to consider you've got to have better options than what you have there with Ashton Davis, who's a raw prospect when you've got a guy who hasn't played for 3 years. That's where I'm fuming about. It's like we knew that kicker, punter. We had good options last year that we let out the building. That's not great. But overall, I do think there's more positives to hark on, but. It is a frustrating day. There's nothing about that. There's nothing really else than just being frustrated.
Yeah, the trouble with trying to find positives, and you're right, you can identify positives in there. No, there are nice moments and nice plays, and they appeared. But I think it's just systemic of where the Jets are as a franchise that we try and find positives. Because you can find them across every single team in the league. But when you take a wide look out at every game that happened on Sunday, and you watch Red Zone and whatever, and you kind of catch the highlights, the Jets as a kind of 53-man roster plus coaching staff were probably quite comfortably the worst product out there on Sunday in the entire National Football League. And it's a cause of the Jets being so bad over the last 10, 11 years that we are forced into finding silver linings, aren't we? We're forced to take Garrett Wilson on 3rd and 10, making a couple of guys miss is like the sexy moment in the first half. We're forced to say, well, if Breece Hall holds onto that fumble and Lawrence Cage doesn't slip, maybe we get closer and we keep the game competitive. Look at the team we share a stadium with, New York Giants. Like, Dable and Sheen put out a competitive product, and that game could have gone either way, and they were perhaps fortunate that Randy Bullock missed a last-minute kick, but they put out a competitive product that you could say, yes, I understand the plan, I understand the identity, I understand what this team is trying to do on the field. Look at Chicago, who we clowned. Yeah, maybe they were helped by the conditions and Trey Lance having a disaster class, but they had a real identity, and they were able to fight and grit through that game. You look at Jacksonville fought back against Washington. These are like the bad bottom quarter NFL teams, and they were still putting on fight and gut and grit. And I get what you're saying, that it was a couple of busted plays that went against us, and you can say it was a great play by Duvernay to catch that first touchdown. It was a busted coverage between Sauce and Joyner for the third one. But I was in the third and fourth quarter. I felt like if the Jets had scored 2 quick touchdowns, the Ravens had like 2, 3, 4 more gears that they could have gone up through. And whenever they needed to get a score, whenever they needed to get a drive, they had that ability to do it. And this is why it's so frustrating, because it's the same issues that we've had. And you can talk about where this comes from, where these problems come from. But until you kind of get this identity, and the Jets have talked so much about culture, identity, all gas, no brakes, we need to see some of that play out on the field for 60 minutes. Because under the Saleh Joe Douglas era, we've seen it in moments, we've seen it in flashes. I don't think there's like one performance which you'd hang your hat on and go, that was it.
Yeah. All the teams you listed, our other struggling teams, didn't play a team as good as the Ravens. Sorry to say, they didn't play. Ravens looked they looked in second gear because we made them look in second gear. The defense played well enough to make them look shoddy. Yes, they did, missing J.K. Dobbins, they're missing a few people, but they're a good team. We kept Mark Andrews mostly in check. He's a dominant player. He's going to have his once in a while. He's in a position where you can exploit matchups, and it happens once in a while. And he's a great player. Made obviously that great catch as well. We made them look in second gear. We can't diminish I don't look, I'm looking at this team. We were expected to lose to this team. We are expected to be a 10-loss team. If we say we want to be 7-10 or 8-9 as our record, we are as fans, even with that record, expecting to lose 9 to 10 games. This is one of the games that we expected to lose. Now, the way we lost it, I wish we would have taken them to the wire and lost it on on a kick or something. Yeah, that's what it is. But we kept them. We made them look as they looked. Like, it wasn't, and we played a better team. Matt, look at the teams. The Titans, the Jaguars played the
Titans were the number 1 seed.
I don't care what the Titans were. That record was fugazi, and also they just happened to be the 1 seed. They weren't the best team in the AFC last year. Plus, and we saw that because we beat them. We saw the inconsistencies in the team. They weren't the best team. Secondly, they're not as good as they were last year. Not just because they don't have AJ Brown, even though that's a massive factor, and we saw what happened with the Eagles. They are not the same team. I don't care. So they're certainly better than the Washington Commanders. And you're talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars. Well, they beat another team who could be a top 5 pick as well. So don't give me that. The San Francisco 49ers and Chicago game was just call it off. Like, in terms of not call off the game, but they play the game. They should have called it off. But you called off the result because whatever works out from that. Look at the way they're sliding. It was a joke that they played on it, to be honest. I mean, absolutely irresponsible for them to be putting athletes out there. Those games, you can say, each of those ones, there was different factors. Now, I'm not saying the Jets should be absolved of what's wrong. They need to look back and correct what's wrong. Otherwise, we're going to have a very long season. But you've got to accept that the Ravens are a team that we expect to be pushing. Lamar Jackson's one of the best quarterbacks, and he had a good game. Like, he didn't have a bad game, but we kept him in check. He didn't explode because we didn't let him explode. We made him pass the ball, which isn't his strong point. He's a great all-rounder, an incredible all-rounder with what he can do on the move. We kept him in check. We made him make the throws, and he made the throws. I get that we're upset.
But that's confusing result and performance, isn't it? Because whatever the scoreline was, like, if the Jets lose but did a good performance,
yeah,
everyone would be buzzing. It was the performance, and yes, the Jets were meant to lose, but there is no excuse week 1 to come out and lose like that.
But the defense did what they had to do. That defense against that team can win the game. If I think that it's just the offense, so the work has to be done. Look, the offensive line didn't gel. Joe Flacco wasn't the guy who needed better. Zach would have done much better than that. And they may have been 2 interceptions instead of 1. They may be different. But Zach's ability to get out of the pocket, had he been there, we're the only team in the NFL who didn't have their starting quarterback. Other than, obviously what's happening with the Browns, but that's, other than that, we're the only team to have it without it. And so you're like, if he was there, those issues would have been mitigated by his ability to get out, not just in the moment of escaping pressure, but actually designed rollouts that would have helped get things moving. We couldn't do that with Joe, because you put Joe out there, he gets destroyed, then we're going to Mike White, and then we just kind of, you got to protect Joe, obviously, to an extent, and trying to work within his strengths. But the problem is that those strengths went against where we were weakness in terms of the pocket, was just collapsing and pressing on him. And then we have to look back at the film. When we get the all 22, we'll be able to see, so many times he was holding on to the ball. You're like, let it rip. He wasn't. Now, was that him being hesitant? Was that the wide receivers not getting open? We'll find out more when we can see the all 22 a bit more. But there's lots of things to get frustrated about, and it has to be better. It can't be as sloppy as it will. Let's get this sloppy game against a team that we might have been lost. Even if we played well, we may have lost the game anyway. I'm not saying, I'm not being defeatist. I'm saying let's just not get ahead of ourselves and say, listen, we let's have our sloppy performance as it's early game. You do get the sloppy performances at the beginning of the season. Let's get it out of the way against a team that we were maybe going to lose anyway, and then we against a team next week against the Browns. they're a more beatable team. Let's go out and beat. Let's go and give them a competitive game. Let's go and try and get the win. Then, let's try and beat teams that aren't as good as the Ravens are. Because I think you're going to find, as we go along, the Ravens are going to be a problem for teams because that defense is like their defensive line was better than we expected. That we know the defensive backfield are really talented even without Marcus Peters there. They have a lot of talent there. So we knew that it'd be maybe hard for our wide receivers to get open, and that may be the case on the film. So let's, like I said, let's just see what happens. I know it's not great, but the thing is, you can't say there was nothing good there because we were competitive in a sense on one side of the ball. If the other side of the ball was better, the game's more competitive. It's simple as that. So that one ball side of the ball has to, well, probably two sides when you think about the kicking game as well. That has to improve. But from the defensive, I said this during the game. I said that defense, we can win games with the defense playing that way because they're not going to be as gassed in the third and fourth quarter as they were because they kept on just coming back on the field. And then you let up. So I don't know. I'm not there with you in terms of the negative. There are lots of things that we have to improve on. But we've got to focus on what worked well. We did stop the run. The cornerbacks look good. The safeties don't look good. But I thought Whitehead did look good. It's just the free safety positions is a worry. I thought the linebackers look better. I think Quincy looked better. Quan looks like a good addition. We tackled better, more assuredly. When we got there, there wasn't these kind of missed tackles that we've been seeing in the last few years. There was just more positivity for me to see there, So... Anyway, where do we go from here? So we're going to obviously we're going to preview the Browns game next week, but this coming week at the end of the week we'll be doing that. But what just overview in terms of where we're going to go forward as a season? Where do you need to see the improvement? What changes do you see? Is anybody that you thought needs to be brought in? Maybe you talked about tackle. I'm talking about maybe safety. What are you thinking in terms of us going forward before we even talk about the specific game matchup on the weekend?
Well, I think it's got to be, you got to park this performance, don't you? Like it was a woeful performance to start the season with, and
yeah,
you can have as much or as little faith that they're going to turn it around and make all the excuses you want. The Jets actually won the time of possession battle against the Ravens, so even saying that the defense wasn't as gassed, well, they shouldn't have been. They were off the field, but they still gave up the big plays. It starts top to bottom. Joe Douglas, Robert Saleh, they've got to be in charge of turning this around. And the reason why it's criminal that Joe Douglas left the tackle position so scarce is that he's now in a position where there's not those replacements. So we're going to have to roll out George Fant and hope that he hasn't regressed. And what we saw last year was the real George Fant, and he's not kind of regressing to where he's been over the rest of his career. We're going to have to hope that the safety positions can hold up and they can fix those back-end communications. We're going to have to hope that this defensive line can get some pressure on the quarterback. There's a lot of hoping that has to be done at the moment, unfortunately, and that's the situation that we can fight for the good that came out of that game and those moments that you spoke about. But it's tough because there isn't really anything that's evidence-based, which gives you hope that Salah's going to be able to turn this around based on what we've seen over the last 18 games that he's been in charge. So Cleveland's a tough matchup, but I think it starts looking at ourselves. It starts kind of identifying, are we happy to go out for the next 16 games and drop more disaster performances like that, where the game was over at the start of the third quarter. The Jets didn't have a chance, and it's embarrassing. So ultimately, where does that get fixed? How do you fix that? And that's on the coaching staff to figure out.
Yeah,
LaFleur needs to call a better game. LaFleur needs to get his offensive game plan going. Carolina scored, 24 points against the Browns yesterday. Carolina's offense is good, but ours should be able to rival it. There's no reason why ours shouldn't be able to rival it, even if they've got Myles Garrett, whoever else on that back end.
They've got some good players, but they're not a complete defense. We're not talking about one of the best defenses. The Cleveland defense is not as. They've got some good players, no doubt. They've got a few decent players throughout, and especially the defensive backfield is pretty decent. We'll obviously look to it more detail later in our preview episode later in the week, but you can put a point against them. Myles Garrett is a problem. The rest of the line isn't as daunting, and we've got to be better. If you're not better,
The problem is you can say the same about Baltimore's defense. Baltimore had a first-time defensive coordinator. They had injuries. They had rookies, and the Jets couldn't score on them. So it's not about worrying about the defense you're facing. It's about worrying about what you're doing as an offense. And you've got to establish a run game. The offensive line has to play better. You have to get some sort of push. You have to kind of get that moving. You have to kind of hold a pocket. You have to call these quick plays. All of the things that when the Jets played well last year in those briefest of moments, they did. And you have to be able to sustain it for 60 minutes. You can't have another game where you are approaching the halfway point in the third quarter and the game is over and people are switching off their TVs and going over to red zone and whatever, because it is embarrassing and you can't have another performance there, because then you're going to come back home in week 3 against the Bengals. No one's going to be up for it and your season's already over. You'll be 0-3 and your season's over. You have to find a performance this week. If you're Robert Saleh, if you're LaFleur, if you're Ulbrich, you have to find a way to stop the Browns on offense. You have to find a way to score points. You have to find a way to move the ball, and you have to not let Braden Mann punt.
Don't let him pin. Yeah, exactly. Don't go in fourth down, or if you're in fourth down, make sure that you're north of the 50-yard line and go for it. No, honestly, I agree. It has to be better performances across the board, especially in the offensive side, and through the two kickers need to have cleaner games. You mentioned earlier that that they look like a different. We've said for many years that they look like they're playing a different sport. Sometimes, you flick on the later games or the games around the league, and we look like we're playing a different sport. I didn't get that sense. Like when I watched us, I didn't get that sense.
No way.
Yeah.
Andre, that's
no. I didn't get that sense.
The way that the Jets turned out yesterday was they were playing slow. They were off the ball.
They made the mistake. They made crucial mistakes. They made crucial mistakes. But I honestly, no. I'm honestly. They didn't look the same. They didn't look. They moved the ball. They moved the ball. They didn't look great, but they moved the ball, but they made mistakes that I'm not saying it was great. I'm not saying great. Obviously, it was a bad performance.
Andres, wait.
Yeah.
Joe Flacco threw the ball for 59 times
for 300 yards.
Just over 300 yards.
Yes.
That is an entirely different sport to what the rest of the NFL is doing. Other teams are moving the ball up and down the field. And you can say backup quarterback, whatever. That's not an excuse. To have nearly 60 attempts and get 300 yards is completely different sport to happen. Like Justin Jefferson alone against the Green Bay Packers, great defense, had 158 yards by halftime single-handedly receiving. That is a different sport, and it's not just the Jets.
But we're not talking about that's the highest end versus we had one of the worst performances, right? But we were against
we were so far behind.
But we're against a better defense than other teams are going to face.
Be up against good defenses all season.
Yes, we are, and we have to be better. We have to be better. I'm not saying we don't have to be better, but there is a difference to what we saw during the Gase years in terms of the offensive output. Even in a bad performance, I saw more talent on the field. I saw more ability that if we play a cleaner game, their line plays a cleaner game, that we know they've got the individual talent. I don't see what I'm making the point. Okay, you can nod your head if you like, but what I'm making the point is that with the talent that's there, if the offensive line plays better to the standard that we know they can individually, what we've seen from them individually, we know they can play better. If they gel and they have to be perfect. They don't have to be perfect. They just have to give Joe a bit more time. We know that the offensive talent we got. First of all, another point, Garrett Wilson needs to play more snaps. Find a way to get Garrett Wilson on the field more often, earlier. Corey Davis is a solid receiver. Garrett Wilson looks special, and then it's going to also help Elijah Moore. Because you've got Garrett Wilson, you talk about strain. Let's put the strain on the defense of the other team. Let them deal with both of those characters at once instead of having to, until the game's already over and then you put Garrett Wilson out there. Get Garrett Wilson out there. I don't care if he's not knowledgeable about the playbook. He has the natural ability that is going to be a game breaker, game winner, and can make plays and make things happen. You need to get him out. We haven't got the ability to not have a player that good not playing as much as possible. That's what I'll say about that. But what I'm saying is that it's not like we are not good enough. We just didn't play well enough. That's the point I'm making. It's like we're not in a sport where we're like, oh yeah, we can't compete with these guys. We're, look at the offensive players here. Look at the defensive. Look at the offensive line. I know our offensive line can play better. I know our wide receivers are good wide receivers. We need better QB play. We need, I know the tight ends are going to be effective from what we've seen. It's like what Conklin said. Of course, it's not what you want to hear from you want them to be more buttoned up and thing. But I get what he's saying when he says that, we're better than this team, because they can tell the quality that they play when they go up against in those joint practices, when they play the preseason game. You get a sense for how you've been. These guys have come from other teams. They've come from, he's come from Minnesota, which we just talked about, Justin Jefferson. So he's played with Justin, and then he knows the team. So he's saying something that don't be disregarded. It's not a good performance. It doesn't mean that we're not a good team. I don't think that we go, oh, this team is not good enough, we can't win. We can win with the players as it stands. Without even a single addition, we can beat plenty of teams in this league. Now, Baltimore are one of the best teams in the league. And so if we don't play our best game against one of the best teams in the league, you're going to lose. And that's what happened. But I don't see us playing a different sport. Like, hey, we've got an XFL roster here. I don't think we've got an XFL roster here. So, like I said, improvements have to be made, but we have the ability to beat Cleveland next week. We have the ability to beat Cincinnati. We have the ability to beat anybody on the schedule, probably other than Buffalo, the only team that really I'm worried about. There's no chance we beat them. But guess what? NFL happens, we can probably beat them, because what happens with the Bengals last year. So I don't want this defeatist attitude. We have a lot of talent. Let's focus on that. Let's improve and let's move forward. And that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying it was good, but I'm not going to be like, let's just pack it up. Let's get everyone, sell the franchise, jump to another team, stop watching NFL. No, come on. Let's just focus on what we can do to be better and get the most out of our talented team that we know we've got more talent. Stop being defeatist. Stop being, like I said, we're not.
No one's being defeatist, but
I think it is to be defeatist. I think it's to be defeatist.
It's not defeatist.
I don't know. I want to be more positive. In spite of the bad performance, you put it aside. You look at the positivity. You work on that. You look at what didn't work well. You get rid of that, and you improve on that, and you move forward. And we can beat other teams. And I really think that we can come out of this 4-game stretch in the AFC, being the fifth member of the AFC North. I think we could be 2-2. Like I'm not on the backs of that performance. Of course, it has to be better. But I don't see why we should be like, oh, I'm scared of these teams. From what I saw, I'm not scared of these teams. I think Baltimore are going to win that division. And so if we can go up against them and but we play better, I think if we play better yesterday, we can win that game yesterday. On talent, we can beat Baltimore. So I don't know. I'm just not gonna, I'm not gonna go in the route. I think we've had enough time to rant about this. Obviously, we're ranting about, we're upset. We're also trying to be hopeful. We have a disconnect, me and you, in terms of we see things a little bit two-sided of each of the coin. But I think we need to obviously calm down. We'll look at the game film. We'll get ready for our preview episode. That will be coming out later this week. Matt, is there anything you want to say to listeners that's more positive, please? No more negativity. No. Anything you want to say to the listeners before we head off?
No, just enjoy your week. Get ready for game 2. The NFL's back, so
yeah, that's fun.
Enjoy it. It is what it is, man.
Yeah, you're so dejected still. Look, I get it. It's horrible to wait all these months and to come out that way. Not ideal. But we've got to look forward in terms of, we've got to say, how do we get the most out of our team? And that, you're right, it comes down to Salah and his squad. Mike LaFleur has to do better in getting these talented players that he's got at his disposal, making a more of an impact on the game. We've got to get Elijah Moore in. There's lots of things, and we'll go into all this detail of what we need to do in our preview episode that will come out later this week. We'll be speaking with the UK Browns guys as well, as part of what we do for the preview, to get a lowdown on them coming off their win against Carolina. We'll be getting ready for next week's game away to Cleveland. So hope you guys enjoy the week. Let's calm down, let's take stock, and let's move forward, and let's see what week 2 brings. So guys, have a great week, and we'll see you later in the week.